Hi, welcome to Bougie and Backpack Podcast. My name is Angel Chin. I'm the founder of Pennywise Traveler, and I'm one of the co-founders of Bougie and Backpack. So I'm so excited today. We have Celeste on the podcast. She is one of our upcoming speakers for our Bougie and Backpack Virtual Summit in April. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're so excited you're here. Do you want to give us a short bio and tell us something about yourself?
Sure. Again, I'm Celeste Lawson from the U.S. I've lived in 5 countries, currently living in Costa Rica. I founded a relocation agency by the name of Melanin Tours in 2021, and I love to travel I love the concept of bougie in a backpack, so not sacrificing quality, but then not breaking the bank either.
We love hearing that from you. So do you want to talk about how you started relocation?
Yes, absolutely. So in March of 2020, I relocated to Costa Rica, sort of by accident. I was looking to leave the U.S. again, and I saw that Southwest had sales on flights to Costa Rica and decided, well, I'm pretty sure I could figure out my life on a beach in Costa Rica. So I came down March 1st. A couple of weeks later, once the announcement was made that COVID had arrived in the country, and we had 2 days to decide whether we were going to stay or leave once the airports closed. I decided to stay, and 2 weeks after that, I met my husband and really decided to stay. From there, so my husband's a local, but I started to seek out expat communities and Facebook groups and things like that. And from there, I started to answer questions about my process and how I moved and things like that. And from there, I saw a need in the market and co-founded the company with my husband.
That's exciting. So when you first started in Facebook groups, how did you find these Facebook groups and what are they named? I'm just kind of curious of how this whole journey started.
Yeah, so I just started to look at expats in Costa Rica or just search for Costa Rica, and those groups started to pop up. And one thing I noticed is that the general groups seemed to be pretty snarky territory. So it was a little frowned upon to ask questions, and some of the people were quite rude, but then happened along into the Black expats in Costa Rica group. And it was just a breath of fresh air. Everyone was positive and happy to answer questions. And it was just, it was a very needed community for me.
Nice. Yeah. So you noticed how it was missing something. You're like, okay, well, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. Why not I start something else and expand from there?
Yeah. So I started answering questions as a form to give back from the information that I had received. But then once I started to find a common theme with the questions, so after the number one question was always, where are all the Black people in Costa Rica? And then after that, the question was, well, what areas should I live in? Because it's easy to think of Costa Rica as a monolith or like a small location because it's about the size of Rhode Island, but it is 6% of the world biodiversity in the country. And so it's pretty vast. 12 different microclimates. And so I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be great if someone could help people or create an experience that would help someone kind of experience the different parts of Costa Rica in a day or so and kind of figure out the vibe and the culture and if they could actually live there as opposed to just visit.
That's kind of cool because it's you hear about people there's this famous TikTok line that says I can live here. Imagine I can live here. It's a very common trending audio. I can live here. And then you actually did the reverse and you actually found a way to live in Costa Rica. So would you say without marrying someone, because you found your husband in Costa Rica, is it hard for an American to actually move to Costa Rica?
Absolutely not. There are so many different avenues in terms of ways to legally immigrate as well as earn money. So the tourist visa just got extended to 6 months last year. So that's an update. There's the digital nomad visa. The retiree visa is actually pretty easy to get. Even without residency, you can start a business as a non-resident and hire a local workforce to earn income. So there's just so many different opportunities in Costa Rica.
Which one would you say is the easiest way to get your foot in?
In terms of how to earn money or just to become a legal resident?
Both. I was asking for both.
So the easiest would be the digital nomad visa. So those can be approved in as little as 15 days. They require the least amount of paperwork. And it's really just kind of like a trial and error. It's for people who aren't exactly committed to the move and just want to try out Costa Rica for a year or two, have a cultural experience. And so it's meant to be a short ramp up period. And so with that, obviously you'll need online income. So you're coming with that income. But if you haven't developed anything online already or working remotely for a company, then you can start a business with or without residency, hire a local workforce. I always tell my clients to come spend 6 months and you will see a need in Costa Rica. Like there's just so many opportunities here, from Airbnb to traditional. There's a rise of micro hotels. There's just a plethora of things that you can do.
Is it expensive for someone to like buy property and then Airbnb it out? Because you mentioned Airbnb. Is that like a common practice that people do in Costa Rica?
Yes, the service department market is very big in Costa Rica now. So there are, especially in San Jose, the capital, there are a number of developers that are building high rises that they sell to owners, and the owners themselves rent them out on Airbnb or traditional 1 year leases. They have 24-hour security, concierge desks. A lot of times, including your HOA fee, they will provide check-in and check-out services for your guests. The only thing you need to manage is your rental as well as cleaning services. A lot of developers these days, they are doing interest-free payments on your down payment. So there's projects that are going out into 2027 where you don't need, 30, 40,000 up front to get in on an apartment. You can make payments over 18 months.
How much does an apartment look like? Just like the average price, like in Costa Rica that you see?
So the average price, I would say around San Jose would be between 100 to 300,000, depending on the size and the area. If you're looking more so around the coast, in the beach areas, you're looking at around 250.
So you literally see people just do that. Like they just, cause like, buying a house in the US is like so expensive. Like it's like over $1 million. So if you spend like you said, like 250,000, right, to buy a house in Costa Rica, right? So let's say let's do an example here, right? You see American prices. It's over $1 million to buy a house in the US. They're like, okay, well, like I went to Costa Rica for a few weeks and I liked it there because like I can technically stay up to Costa Rica up to 6 months, right? I mean, how Southwest works. For Southwest, for people that don't know, you can easily cancel a ticket on Southwest with points or with cash, and you either get the cash travel credit or the points credited back to your Southwest points balance. So you don't have to worry about like not getting back the points or the cash price. And literally with Southwest, you can cancel like up to, I think it's like 15 minutes before the flight leaves or so. But of course, before that, so you don't get like anxiety, of course, so let's say like we were to play this hypothetical situation. You plan to go to Costa Rica. You buy a ticket on Southwest with both a return date and a like two tickets, like two one-way tickets. So like one-way ticket to get to Costa Rica and another ticket to go back to the US. You spent like a week or two in Costa Rica. Then you decided, hey, like I actually want to stay here longer. And now with the given rules, Costa Rica lets you stay here for up to 6 months. So you're like, okay, then you can also like cancel that Southwest ticket and technically buy another one at a later date and be fine because that Southwest credit is still back to your account. And then you have that time to actually explore Costa Rica and look into other opportunities. Now you're seeing this opportunity to go buy a house in Costa Rica, and it's about like $250,000, like you said. And then you think to yourself, well, the house in the US is like $1 million. So you look into other employment opportunities while you're there. So that's the hypothetical situation we're putting yourself in.
Exactly. And also the banks are becoming more expat friendly. So within the last 18 months, banks are starting to lend to US, Canadian, UK citizens.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty like new, just because I know that right now a lot of people, they're looking to other places to live in besides the US and stuff. So that's a pretty good thing to think about, just because I think for everyone, the number one thing that they think about is like, how complicated is this process? Like, is it hard for me to get all the documentations and stuff? And then like for you, you're saying like, if you want to test it out, take advantage of the tourist visa first, right? Then you have the digital nomad visa if you have like online income or so for the digital nomad visa. And if not, look into property and buying in Costa Rica is another option.
Yeah, and with 150 K property, that opens you up for residency as well.
These are all things that like you never really think about, you know, like how hard the process is or how complicated it is. And it's like the paperwork, have you seen it like being very like troublesome in those kind of paperwork, or is it pretty simple like for just like opening a bank account in Costa Rica to get the loan and stuff to buy the house?
So that is where having a contact with boots on ground does help you. So with the language barrier and the way the laws are set up, so we help clients that come in. We've had several clients that came in on a relocation tour and we took them to the bank. We use our connections to get them account during their week-long trip as well.
So how hard is the paperwork to get to Costa Rica?
Yeah. So the paperwork, if you're wanting to file, let's say the digital nomad visa, so that can actually be done from your home country. So you can do that before you get to Costa Rica, or, while you're on the tourist visa, you can apply while you're there. It's about $100 fee. You just need your bank statements and a short application letter that you can get on the tourism website for Costa Rica. So that's pretty simple. Residency is a little bit more complicated. I did mine myself, but I also speak Spanish. So that can be one of the barriers once you start to think about longer term living. But if you're here for 6 months, a couple of years on a digital nomad visa, there's plenty of time to take Spanish classes. You can work with the relocation expert. There's so many different avenues to make it a seamless and stress-free process.
Did you know Spanish, like a lot of Spanish before you moved to Costa Rica, or you didn't know that much Spanish at all?
So that is so funny. When I met my husband, he was a basic English and I was basic Spanish.
You were
So
trained.
yes, we did. So we decided to quarantine together because being in different cultures, different languages, and in a pandemic, we were just like, okay, if this is going to work, we're going to have to really commit. So we quarantined together. And I would say within 6 to 8 months, I had a high intermediate level. So from basic, like beginner basic to high intermediate.
How hard is it finding like a Spanish school in Costa Rica? Is it pretty easy, and like are the classes like taught pretty often so it's like easy to fit into your schedule, or is it pretty like hard to find a school?
Yeah, so the schools are pretty easy around San Jose, and you can do it as little as 1 hour a week to 20 hours a week, depending on your schedule. Um, for me, I use a private tutor online through Zoom, as well as practice with my husband, watching shows on Netflix in Spanish, as well as I didn't use Duolingo for me. I didn't feel like it was in depth enough, but Spanish DICT was a good one, as well as Paul Noble's Spanish program on Audible was really good.
But how expensive is a private tutor, just in case people want to go the private tutor route?
It could be anywhere from $10 an hour to, depending on the teacher, obviously, somewhere around 25 dollars an hour. But for Spanish, they're typically pretty affordable.
How did you find the private tutor?
Through an expat group. So the one that I initially used, I found her in an expat group. Last year, though, when I decided that I wanted to increase my vocabulary because I would like to take some college courses in Spanish, I decided to go back to private tutors, and I found an app called Preply, Preply on Facebook. And so it's almost kind of like a dating app, but for language tutors. And so it was pretty user friendly and affordable. And so they had like all the languages on there: Spanish, French, Italian, German, English. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I like your tips about how you're going about finding a different ways to learn Spanish and stuff. Just because like I think by default people think of Duolingo, and you're like, no, there's actually better resources besides that. Because like I think for me also, it's like when I learned Spanish in high school, that was like years ago, you know, and now like to get back into that, it's like I guess that's one of the first questions that people have. It's like, how often is English spoken in Costa Rica? And when it's hard like to find places that speak English, how hard is it to find a Spanish teacher? So would you say like the places that you've been to Costa Rica, is it English really well spoken, or just a basic amount of English to get by?
Yeah, so and I'm just like you, took Spanish in high school, college. When I was with Verizon, they paid for courses and it just never really stuck, and even with Duolingo. And so when I first got here, I felt like it was a little challenging. I think mostly because of the pandemic. And so I was in a beach town, Playas del Coco at the time, and it would be, 2 to 3 weeks would go by before I had someone that I could speak English with. So it was a little rough, but I feel like over the past few years, especially since we've moved to San Jose, I definitely encounter more people that speak English. One thing I did notice is that, so we'll take the banks, for example. Typically, I haven't encountered many people under the general manager level that speak English fluently. So that will give you like a good idea of what the general, so most people speak some English, but fluently, it's mostly been general managers at banks, doctors, attorneys. So at the college education level and higher is typically where I run more into people who are fluent in, well, bilingual, fluently in schools, obviously, as well.
No, because I feel like that's a common question that people have is like when they travel, they're like, how much is the language barrier? Like, do I have to know the language when I get here? Because I know that that's a common reason why a lot of people they go to different places in Europe. Because like you know how in Europe a lot of places they speak English and also like French or like Spanish or like like the other like like whatever like Portuguese or whatever language they're going to because English is so well spoken in different places like in the world. So that's why a lot of people go to those places. So I was kind of curious if like for Costa Rica. I've been to Costa Rica
You
before.
know,
Yeah.
and I spend 6 to 8 weeks every year in Europe. And so this past year it was 8 weeks. And so my daughter and I, we started out, we'd spend a week in Madrid, a
Hmm.
week in Nice. We stopped through Naples, Italy, hated it there and immediately left. 12 days in Qatar. And then we were 6 days in Turkey, I think is how they pronounce
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And so I felt like there was a really high language barrier there. I felt like I spoke English more in Costa Rica than I did in, well, not Spain. There was a lot of English there. But in Nice, France, there was a big language barrier. And in Turkey, my daughter, she laughed at me because whenever I didn't understand what someone was saying, I would speak Spanish. She was like, what are you I said, well, I'm going to be confused. They'll be confused.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think that's one of the barriers that people have about relocating abroad because like like let's say like if you were to retire in the US versus Costa Rica. Costa Rica it's like what so much cheaper like you look at the housing price for example already, right? Like you said it's up to like 300,000 like at least 200 to 300,000 that you're expecting to pay for to buy property. But if you're looking at the prices of like if someone was to retire in like Costa Rica versus the US and how much process it would take them to like get there, they think from that standpoint, like if I was to relocate to Costa Rica, how are the insurances there? How's the medical? How's the doctors and everything else there? Would you say it was pretty easy for you to like find a doctor and everything else, like how you would normally find in the US?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually think that the medical system here is a lot easier to deal with. For example, most of the hospitals, they promote wellness and preventative checks. So typically you can go on their websites and they will have specials on wellness checkups and preventative checkups. Laboratories are all separate from the hospital groups. So you don't need a doctor's order. Like any lab test you want to get run, you just go to the lab, order it, pay for it, and they'll upload the results to an online portal. And you can go pay a doctor to interpret them depending on whether you need that or not. For me, I'm a veteran. So for all of my rated conditions from the military, the VA covers them. And I found a hospital group that actually bills them directly. And so they also bill different international insurance groups as well. So there's not that fear that I'm going to get stuck with this big deposit or bill trying to get care. So, everything's taken care of. And then there are several different private healthcare programs in Costa Rica. One works like a discount program. It's called MediSmart. And so, but it works very similar to insurance. And so a lot of the procedures, you can get up to 80% off. And I like it because you can actually go on their website before you sign up and use the quote tool to see what all of the costs are before you even sign up for the plan. And it's usually around $10 to $15 a month. per person for the coverage. Then you have travel insurance. There's just so many options in Costa Rica, and obviously the national health care, which is a requirement if you do decide to become a resident.
So $10 to $15 a month, that's pretty cheap. Compared to the US, how expensive healthcare is. So what's the for the national healthcare, like how much is that like roughly about? Like
So again, you only have access if you're a citizen or a resident. But for example, it's let's say a retiree, which is the type of clientele that I deal with a lot. Um, their monthly payment for the national health care is around $150.
Mhm.
It's with their exchange rate.
That's not that bad because like I know some people that in the US because they're freelancers and stuff, they pay $600 a month for healthcare. So
Yeah,
that yeah, that's pretty cheap then. And then like also it's like
and
that's
that was
just
the
for
family.
150 is for the whole family.
Yeah,
So not even one person, just the whole family.
exactly. Yeah,
What?
so like then he covers me under his family plan.
That's
So
pretty
yeah,
good though. $150 compared to $600 for like one person, like in the US, because I have friends that are freelancers and that's how much they pay. And then for like dental care and vision care, is it pretty like affordable there as well?
yes. So my daughter, I finally convinced her to move last year. And so she came down and she had braces that she had had on for a while. She got caught up in the COVID rush where she wasn't able to get her braces taken off in time. And so we paid, I want to say about $200 to get her braces removed. She had like some cavities and they were about $25 each to get fillings. And my husband, he needed a new bridge of about, I think, 8 teeth that needed to be repaired or replaced, I'll say. And it was like $2,500.
That's like so cheap. It's only like $25. So she had a filling for $25 per tooth.
Yes.
That's so cheap because like in the US, that's like at least 100 or more for like the
Yes.
so So in theory, what you're saying is that like if you're to relocate to Costa Rica and do like the digital nomad visa or the tourist visa for like a few months and stuff, and then you see how affordable it is here for the healthcare, the vision, and the dental care, because that's the main blocks that people have a lot of times. It's like the language barrier,
Uh-huh.
like healthcare, how good is it here? How much accessibility is it here? How are like I guess like the other basic stuff is like how are the food prices and how are like the gym? Like if someone wants to live like a day to day here, like what would that like be like? Because I know
Yeah.
of course Costa Rica has hiking trails that you can go on, of course, but like what about like the gym and like the food prices here?
Yeah, so like you said, there's hiking trails. Most of the high rises or condo communities, gated communities have gyms on the premise, but then there's also Smart Fit, which is a chain similar to Planet Fitness, and I believe they're about $25 a month.
So that's pretty
And
affordable.
yeah, and there's lots of Pilates studios and twerking classes. So yeah.
You're gonna find a similar lifestyle to what you have in the US. You'll find your Pilates studio. Do you know if the Pilates studio is it in English or Spanish? Or like you don't know?
That is a good question. So, I have a friend who actually just got certified in Pilates. She speaks English, but I'm not sure if she does her classes in English. But there's usually someone that can translate and, make sure that you're not falling behind.
Yeah, because I think that's a concern that a lot of people have. It's like if they want to keep up with their US like lifestyle here, how can my lifestyle be like in Costa Rica? Is it gonna have the same amount of healthcare? Is it gonna be cheaper, more expensive? How is the vision? How is like the normal day to day? How are the grocery prices? How is the gym? How is like, like the little stuff that we think about?
Yeah, and those things are in mostly in Escazú, where there's a high occurrence of people that speak English. So it's dubbed the Beverly Hills of Costa Rica. So that's where you get your fancy dining, your fine dining, your Pilates, your gyms. Multi Plaza is the major mall group, your PF Chang's and your five-star hotels. So in that area is very expat friendly.
How are the food prices there? Like when you were to buy like let's say you eat out at a restaurant or like for like buying grocery wise, how are the food prices?
Okay, so the food prices, so I keep seeing a lot of people posting online these days about how their carton of eggs is around $3 or $4. Almost like a slap to what's going on in the US. So, but to answer your question, it will highly depend on how much you're buying in imported goods. But for me, I personally mostly shop in Price Mart, it is a subsidiary of Costco. So, like for example, I can get like a big bag of oranges, like almost 20 oranges for around $10, and those are imported, or tangerines. So typically, my monthly run to Price Mart will run me about $250.
Okay, so similar to the US. So not too bad. Yeah, because like I think that's like a comfort thing that people have too. Like I still have yet to do this also, but like when how you see how Costco is like international, like I still haven't been to a Costco in Mexico, a Costco in Korea or anything like that. But it is comforting to know that like you have one that's also in Costa Rica, like a similar concept.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that I could lower my grocery bill if I ate more local, regional products, or if I just stuck to going to the weekly farmers market. But I like my imported goods.
No, you gotta do what's best for you. How are like food prices like restaurant wise? Like if someone is to
So,
look back.
yeah. So the local chain restaurants, so like mom and pop restaurants, they're called sodas. And so a typical meal at a soda will run you about $7 to $10. And so that's your protein, rice, beans, plantains, and a drink. And then I've visited restaurants to where, my sister, my husband, and my daughter, we went out to lunch and spent almost $300. So
Yeah,
it,
you have like
yeah.
a range. But if you really, let's say like you really want to do it in a bougie in a backpack way because you're just trying to like budget and everything. So you came here to Costa Rica and you're like, okay, I'm gonna stay here longer. I'm either gonna stay at a hostel or look into buying property just to expand my visas and stuff. And if I want to be really cheap and eat out every day, it's only $7 for each plate. So it's not like at the thing you mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then also if I wanted to learn Spanish, I can look at roughly starting at $10 an hour for a private tutor if I wanted to look at the how much it would cost to take lessons.
Exactly.
So it's pretty
Yeah.
affordable. Yeah.
Yep. The sodas, a lot of times the food is better there than the fancy restaurants.
But you're getting the authentic food. So it's like, well, because I think if you're just factoring time and everything, like how you want to manage budget wise, you're looking at that price estimates per day if you want to experience visiting Costa Rica for the first time and seeing like, hey, this is how much I can expect. And you're doing the prices mostly out of San Jose, right? Because that's where you're based out of, right?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
even in the beach towns these days, if you stay with the sodas, the local mom and pop restaurants, that's pretty much the average for most areas in Costa Rica.
Okay, so that's a pretty good estimate. So like this is a pretty much good like framework to look into if you're trying to relocate outside to like Costa Rica, for example. These are really good options to look into like how much prices will cost you about and just to expand from there. You could buy like a ticket on Southwest or whatever airline you want to fly into and just plan out your journey from there and that's pretty good.
Yeah,
Okay.
Google Flights is definitely the move to look for great flights. And there are more and more direct flights opening up from the US, different airlines. So there's American, Avianca, Alaska, Southwest, Delta, JetBlue. So many options.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So if you want to learn more about relocation and also about Costa Rica, Celeste, she's actually speaking at our virtual summit that's going to be in April. The details in the show notes about where to find the virtual summit. Also, Celeste will give you information about where to find her as well.
Yes, thank you. So I am on at www.melanintours, MELANIN tours.com, and all the socials at Melanin Tours. And we're excited to be launching our newest group relocation tours. So anyone can sign up for our private relocation tour starting at $1,500. But we're excited to have a new accessible option for our bougie in the backpack crowd, and starting at $150 for our day tour.
That's exciting. We're excited to learn more about your new opportunity as well. So if you found this podcast helpful, feel free to leave us a podcast rating and review. These podcast ratings and reviews all helps us find more ways to have the podcast with the sponsorships and also the speakers as well. So feel free to leave us a good podcast rating and review so you can find more speakers like Celeste on the podcast. All right. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.